It had been a year since I ended things with Lisa, but the terror still lingered in the back of my mind, a constant reminder that sometimes love could turn deadly. The phone buzzed on the table and I froze. My heart skipped a beat. It was probably nothing, just another random message, but I couldn't help the anxiety that crept up every time my phone lit up. Was it her? Or maybe her twisted friends? I had no way of knowing anymore. I thought I had escaped. Thought that walking away from her would mean leaving the madness behind. But I was wrong. The fear didn't go away. It followed me, settled like a dark cloud over my life, always lurking just out of sight. I couldn't help but wonder, was I still being watched? Was she still out there waiting for me to slip up? Everything had seemed perfect at first. We met, we laughed, we loved. But soon something shifted. It wasn't just love anymore. It was control, obsession, and fear. I should have seen it then, but I was blinded by the illusion of happiness. Now, every moment felt like a ticking time bomb, waiting for the explosion that would come. And deep down I knew, this wasn't over. Not yet. We met at a mutual friend's party, and from the start, it felt like something out of a movie. She was perfect, charming, funny, and beautiful. We hit it off instantly, and for the first time I felt like I had found someone who truly understood me. Lisa was the type of person who could make you feel like the center of the universe with just a glance. She made me feel special, wanted, something I hadn't realized I'd been craving. We spent months in a whirlwind of dates, spontaneous adventures, and late-night talks. I couldn't get enough of her. I had never been so happy. She made me feel like I had found my soulmate, someone who would always have my back. But it was during those quiet moments when things seemed perfect that I began to notice the cracks. At first, it was small things, little comments here and there about my friends, my family, or my time spent away from her. It didn't raise any red flags at first. After all, who wouldn't want to spend every moment with the person they loved? But as the days went on, these little things started to grow. She'd ask where I was, who I was with, and why I took so long to respond to a text. It was subtle, almost sweet, but I began to feel the pressure. I told myself it was normal, that I was just overthinking. But the seeds of doubt had been planted. As the months passed, Lisa's behavior became harder to ignore. What once seemed like sweet affection soon morphed into something suffocating. I couldn't even go out with friends without receiving an endless barrage of texts or calls. At first, I brushed it off as concern, but then it started to feel like control. She would show up uninvited, accusing me of lying about where I was. I remember one night, after a simple dinner with a couple of friends, she turned up at my door, her eyes wild with anger. "Where were you?" she demanded, her voice trembling with something between fear and rage. "I told you, I was with Jason and Mark," I replied, trying to stay calm, but her grip on the doorframe was tight, like she was trying to physically stop me from leaving. "Who was she?" she asked, her eyes narrowing. "I saw you with someone. You didn't mention anyone else." I didn't have the energy to argue anymore. But it wasn't just the jealousy that started to haunt me. It was the emotional manipulation. Lisa would cry, beg me to stay, and promise that everything would get better, that she just wanted me to be hers. The worst came when I tried to break up with her. She slapped me hard. It wasn't the first time she'd raised her hand, but it was the first time I truly realized the power she had over me. The slap echoed in my ears long after it happened, and in that moment, I knew things were never going to be the same. I started to retreat, distancing myself from my family and friends, too afraid to make her angry. I became someone I didn't recognize, lost in the web of her obsession. It wasn't until the night she crossed the final line that I knew I had to make a choice: leave or risk losing everything. I had no choice but to end it. My heart was racing as I sat her down in the dimly lit living room. I couldn't look her in the eye as I said the words that would forever change everything. "We're done, Lisa. I can't do this anymore." She froze for a moment like she didn't understand. Then her face twisted in disbelief. "You can't do this to me," she whispered, her voice breaking, and before I could say anything more, she snapped. "You think I'm going to let you go that easily?" she screamed, her voice escalating with fury. Tears streamed down her face, but the anger quickly overtook the sadness. She lunged toward me, her nails scratching at my chest. "You're mine," she hissed, trying to grab hold of me. I recoiled, fear crawling up my spine, but I held my ground. This has to end, Lisa. It's over. But it didn't end. That night, I lay in bed, terrified of what might happen next. Then, just a few hours later, I woke to the sound of footsteps on my porch. The floorboards creaked as the handle to my front door rattled violently. My heart slammed in my chest. I turned on the bedside lamp, my hands shaking, and then I heard it, a muffled voice faint through the door. "You can't get away from me, not now, not ever." I felt the cold rush of panic. She had come back. Only this time it wasn't just her. There was someone else with her. In a flash, I dialed 911. My breath quickened as I heard her shouting outside, her rage deafening. "You'll regret this," she screamed. "No one ever leaves me." I knew then, it was no longer just an unhealthy relationship. It was a fight for my safety, my sanity, and my life. The days that followed were a blur of paranoia and fear. My phone never stopped buzzing. Every ring, every message, my heart raced, dreading that it was her or one of her twisted friends. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, hunted. No matter how many times I checked the locks or peeked through the blinds, it never felt safe. I couldn't stay in the same place anymore. But moving didn't help. Changing my phone number didn't help. Even deleting my social media felt futile, like the walls of my own life were closing in on me. One afternoon, my anxiety hit a peak. I couldn't eat, sleep, or think straight. It was like I was constantly running, but from what? Her obsession had turned into a full-blown nightmare. I had to do something that would finally give me a chance at peace. That's when I walked into the courthouse. I felt numb as I sat in front of the judge, the papers in my hands, restraining order. It wasn't going to stop the fear, but at least it was a step forward. At least there was something legal to back me up. The judge signed the order, but the words he said still echoed in my mind. "You can't predict what people like her will do next." I wasn't sure if the judge was offering me hope or warning me, but his words stayed with me. The terror was still there, a constant companion, but now I had something in my corner, something to hold on to. Still, the thought of Lisa, her fury, her obsession, kept me up at night. I couldn't forget the look in her eyes when I told her it was over. It wasn't just anger. It was madness. But I had to keep moving forward. I had to keep fighting for my own safety, my own freedom. I thought I was free, but I wasn't. At least not yet. It's been months since I took that step to file for the restraining order, but the weight of it still lingers. The world around me has slowly shifted, and the once crushing fear is now a dull ache that I carry with me. But there's something else, something that has changed deep inside me. I don't recognize the person I used to be before all of this. The naive, hopeful one who believed love was always supposed to be easy and safe. I never thought I would be one of those people, the ones who got trapped. I used to look at them and wonder how they didn't see the signs. But now I get it. Now I see the small moments, the red flags that I ignored, and the creeping sense of unease that should have been a warning. I've learned so much from this. Not just about the darkness that can hide behind a smile or a kind word, but about myself. I'm more cautious now, more aware. I've rebuilt my trust bit by bit, but I'm not the same. I'm stronger. I have to be. I tell my story now to anyone who will listen. I know it's not the same for everyone. It doesn't always end with a legal order or a fresh start. But maybe, just maybe, hearing this will help someone spot the signs early before it's too late. So here's my warning. Love shouldn't feel like a prison. If you feel trapped, scared, controlled, get out. The longer you wait, the more it hurts. The signs are there waiting for you to see them. Trust yourself. Trust your instincts. Don't let someone turn your world into a nightmare because you think love will change them. It won't. You don't have to live like that. You are worth more than that. It's been a year since I ended things with Morgan, but it feels like it was only yesterday. The weight of it, the constant fear, the sleepless nights, the shadows following me everywhere, never went away. Every time I close my eyes, I can still see Morgan's face, fury, desperation, twisted love. And then the silence, the suffocating silence that never feels real. Sometimes it's like I can still hear their voice, whispering threats in the dark. I thought moving to a new city would help me forget. A fresh start. A new life. I found an apartment in a quiet part of town, with nothing but the soft hum of the streetlights and the rustling of the trees outside. I should feel safe here, right? But no matter how many locks I put on my door, how many times I check the windows, it never feels enough. Every creak of the floorboards, every knock on the door sends my heart racing. I can't escape the feeling that someone is always watching. The world around me is calm, but inside my chest, there's a constant storm. I can't shake the paranoia, the sense of dread that gnaws at me every waking moment. It was supposed to be over. The nightmare should have ended the day I walked away. But then, it happened. A message. I sat on the couch, scrolling through my phone absent-mindedly when I saw it. An unknown number. My stomach dropped. I hesitated for a moment, unsure if I was ready to read what I knew would be there. "You'll never escape me, Alex." No name, but I knew it. My heart pounded in my ears and my palms grew sweaty. The nightmare hadn't ended. It had only begun. I remember when it all started, when it felt like fate, like something out of a movie. I was at a friend's party, standing near the snack table, pretending to be interested in a conversation I didn't care about. Then I saw them. Morgan. They were laughing with a group of people, effortlessly charming everyone in the room. I didn't think much of it at first. Just another face in the crowd. But then our eyes met. The connection was instant. The spark was undeniable. Morgan came over to me with a smile as if we'd known each other forever. We talked about everything and nothing at all. The conversation flowed so easily I lost track of time. One drink turned into two, and before I knew it, I found myself alone with them, the rest of the party fading into the background. "I'm really glad we met," Morgan said, their voice soft but full of meaning. And I was too. They were perfect. They listened to me, made me laugh, and somehow made me feel like I was the only person in the room. Every little thing they did seemed to confirm what I already thought. This was what love was supposed to feel like. Safe, easy, exciting. As weeks went by, everything seemed to fall into place. We spent hours on the phone, went on spontaneous trips, and shared our most intimate secrets. It felt like I had found my soulmate. I couldn't believe my luck. It wasn't just love, it was something more. It was a deep, powerful connection. But then the calls started getting more frequent. The texts were more demanding, each one laced with an edge of urgency. "Where are you? What are you doing?" I didn't think much of it at first. Morgan was just protective, right? They cared. That's what love was after all. At least that's what I told myself. But deep down, something didn't sit right. Every time I didn't respond immediately, Morgan's messages became more insistent. It was as if they couldn't stand the thought of me being out of their sight. I felt like I was constantly being watched, even when we were apart. It wasn't love anymore. It was control. But I didn't realize it at the time. Not yet. As the days went on, I started noticing things, little signs that I had ignored before, chalking them up to simple quirks of affection. But now, those quirks were starting to feel like chains. Morgan wasn't just calling me anymore. They were showing up, unannounced, unexpected. It was subtle at first. I'd run into them at the grocery store, and they'd act as though it was a coincidence. Then it happened again, at the coffee shop, then outside my apartment building. I tried to brush it off as chance, but soon it became clear. This wasn't accidental. Morgan was tracking me. "I saw you at the cafe today," Morgan texted me one afternoon. "You didn't even say hello." I was right there. That was the first time I felt the knot of fear in my stomach. It was more than a feeling of being watched. It was the certainty that they were following me. And no matter how much I tried to push the thought away, I knew deep down I was right. Then came the demands. Where had I been? Why hadn't I answered the phone? Who was I with? Morgan started questioning every moment of my day. If I was 5 minutes late, it turned into a full interrogation. They'd call, send texts, and even show up at my door just to check if I was telling the truth. I used to think it was just them caring, being protective, but now it felt like something darker was creeping in, something suffocating. One night I tried to break up with them. I couldn't do it anymore. The constant checking, the jealousy, the possessiveness, it was all too much. I needed to breathe, to be myself again. "I can't keep living like this, Morgan," I said, trying to steady my voice, but it cracked with fear. "This isn't healthy. We need to end this." Morgan's face shifted instantly, Gone was the charming, sweet person I thought I knew. What replaced them was someone else. Someone angry. Someone who was used to getting what they wanted. "You can't leave me," they whispered, their eyes narrowing, their voice low and cold. I took a step back, but before I could get further, Morgan slapped me hard. The sting across my cheek took me by surprise. It wasn't just the pain that cut deep. It was the realization. This wasn't love. This was something else entirely. "You think you can leave me? You think I'll let you go?" Morgan hissed, their grip tightening around my wrist. I tried to pull away, but they wouldn't let go. The fear was suffocating, and as much as I wanted to fight back, I was paralyzed. This wasn't a person who loved me anymore. It was someone who was willing to hurt me, who thought they could own me. I had just become another possession to them. I managed to pull myself away from their grip, my heart pounding. It was the first time I realized just how dangerous things had become. But it wasn't enough. I should have left right then and there, but I was too scared to even think clearly. Instead, I told myself it was just one mistake, just one slip-up. Maybe they didn't mean it. Maybe things would get better. But deep down, I knew I couldn't ignore the warning signs anymore. And it was only going to get worse. That night, I locked the doors and crawled into bed, trying to shake off the terror that gripped me. I couldn't sleep, couldn't escape the feeling that I was being watched. The dread was a constant companion now, never leaving me alone. I had no idea then, but I was about to discover just how far Morgan would go to keep me. I thought I could escape. I thought leaving Morgan behind would be enough to end the nightmare. But I was wrong. The walls I had built around myself were no match for the sheer obsession Morgan had for me. The next few days blurred together in a haze of fear and anxiety. My phone constantly buzzed with messages, my heart racing every time I saw a notification. But this time it wasn't just the texts. The messages had become more ominous, more threatening. They weren't just asking where I was or what I was doing. Now they were accusing me of abandoning them, betraying them. One message in particular made my stomach churn. "You think you can escape me? You're mine, Alex. You always will be. No one else will ever have you." I tried to block Morgan's number, but the messages kept coming from different numbers, different accounts. It didn't matter what I did. I couldn't escape. Morgan was everywhere. Then it happened. The moment I knew there was no turning back. It was late, well past midnight, when I heard the sound. A knock on the door. Soft at first, tentative. But it was the kind of knock that set my entire body on edge. My heart thudded in my chest, and every instinct screamed for me to hide, to run. But I stayed frozen, hoping that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't Morgan. Maybe it was someone else. The knock came again, louder this time. I didn't want to open the door. I knew better. But something inside me made me look through the peephole. And there they were, Morgan standing outside my door, their eyes wild, their face pale. I backed away from the door slowly, my breath shallow, my mind racing. Why were they here? What did they want? And then I heard their voice. It wasn't the voice I knew. It was something darker, something colder. "Let me in, Alex. I know you're in there." I stumbled back, panic bubbling up in my throat. I grabbed my phone, dialing 911 with trembling hands. But before I could hit send, the door handle rattled. Morgan was trying to force their way in. I rushed to the phone, dialing the police, but the words wouldn't come out. The terror was paralyzing me. "You can't hide from me, Alex," Morgan shouted through the door. "I'll never let you go. You're mine. Do you hear me?" The sound of Morgan's voice made my blood run cold. This wasn't the person I had fallen for. This was someone else. Someone I didn't recognize. Someone capable of anything. And then the door flew open. They weren't just outside anymore. Morgan was inside my apartment, standing in the doorway, blocking my escape. Their hands were trembling, but their eyes were fixed on me, wild and desperate. "You're not going anywhere, Alex." I backed away, heart racing, my thoughts a jumbled mess. I wanted to scream, but the words stuck in my throat. All I could do was look at Morgan, once the love of my life, and see the monster they had become. "Get out," I whispered, my voice shaking with fear. "Please just leave me alone." But Morgan wasn't listening. They were coming closer, their hands outstretched, as if they were going to pull me into their arms. But there was no love in those hands now, only possession. "You don't get to decide that," they said, their voice low and dangerous. I saw the knife then. It was glinting in their hand, shiny, sharp, and deadly. My heart dropped. I felt a cold sweat break out on my skin. Morgan wasn't just angry anymore. They were out of control. They weren't just threatening me with words, they were threatening me with a weapon. And I knew right then that they weren't going to stop until they had me. "I'll kill anyone who tries to take you from me," Morgan hissed, taking a step forward. Their grip on the knife tightened, and my eyes locked on it, my entire body frozen in fear. Every instinct told me to run, to fight, to do anything to escape. But I couldn't move. I couldn't think. I was paralyzed by the terror, by the raw fear coursing through my veins. And then, suddenly, I heard it, the sound of sirens. The police had arrived. Morgan hesitated for a split second, their eyes darting to the window. That was all I needed. I ran fast as I could, bolting for the door. I didn't even look back. I heard Morgan scream my name, but I was already out the door and into the hallway. My feet pounded against the floor as I ran toward the elevator, praying to God that the police would stop them. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely press the button. When the elevator finally opened, I jumped inside, slamming the button for the ground floor. I had never felt so trapped in my life. I had never felt so powerless. But I had to get away. As the doors of the elevator closed, I thought about what I had just escaped. I was terrified, but somehow I knew this wasn't over. Morgan wasn't finished with me yet. And I had no idea how much farther they would go to make sure I never left. I thought I had escaped. I thought the worst was over, but the truth was the real battle had only just begun. The police were able to get Morgan out of my apartment that night, but the damage was already done. They weren't arrested. No, they were given a warning, a slap on the wrist, and I was left with the lingering fear that at any moment they could come back. That sense of dread followed me everywhere. Every knock on the door, every passing shadow, every unfamiliar face made my stomach churn. I filed for a restraining order the next morning. I needed protection. I needed a guarantee that I could finally feel safe again. The paperwork was long, grueling, and emotionally draining. I had to relive everything, recount every interaction, every moment of fear, every terrifying night. The courtroom was cold and sterile, the judge's face impassive as he listened to my story. I told him everything, every horrifying detail about Morgan's obsession, about the violence, the threats. The judge granted the restraining order, but as I left the courtroom I felt no relief. A piece of paper. That's all it was. A piece of paper that said Morgan couldn't come near me, but that was all. The law couldn't protect my mind, my soul. The law couldn't erase the terror that clung to me like a second skin. I moved to a new apartment, far away from the one I had shared with Morgan. I thought a change of scenery might help, but the fear didn't leave. It followed me. It was in the creaks of the floorboards, the flicker of the lights, the sound of someone whispering my name when no one was around. Morgan still found ways to reach me. They used fake numbers, hidden accounts. The messages never stopped. They would write things like, "You can't hide from me," or, "I'm always watching you." Sometimes I would get a phone call and just hear breathing on the other end. Silent. Chilling. Just enough to make me doubt my own safety. I started looking over my shoulder constantly. I checked the locks on my doors a dozen times a day, even though I knew they were secure. I stopped going out at night. I avoided walking alone. I isolated myself, cut myself off from friends, from family. I couldn't risk being vulnerable. The psychological toll was worse than the physical one. I was exhausted, emotionally, mentally, physically. But even with the restraining order, even with the police involved, Morgan was relentless. I got a new job, hoping it would help me start fresh. But even there, I couldn't escape. One morning I walked into the office and saw it, a note tucked under my desk. It read, "You can't hide from me. I'll find you." I froze. My heart pounded in my chest. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. Not at work, not in front of anyone. The walls were closing in on me and I couldn't escape. I filed another report, but the police were getting tired of my calls. They couldn't do anything unless Morgan physically harmed me. It felt like I was losing my grip on everything. That was when I decided to take control, to fight back. I knew that I couldn't let Morgan control my life any longer. I had to do something or they would keep breaking through every barrier I built. I contacted a private investigator, hired a lawyer, and began to take legal action into my own hands. I wasn't just going to sit and wait for Morgan to come for me again. I was going to take the fight to them. And that's when I finally realized something that made me sick to my stomach. I wasn't just fighting Morgan. I was fighting myself. I was fighting the fear they had instilled in me. I was fighting the person I had become because of them. I was living in a cage, and the only way out was to destroy the fear once and for all. The legal battle stretched on, long and painful. It was hard to concentrate on anything else. Every day felt like a war. But through it all, I began to regain a little piece of myself. I started attending therapy to deal with the trauma. I surrounded myself with people who cared, who would help me rebuild my strength. But no matter how much I tried to heal, a part of me was always looking over my shoulder. always listening for footsteps in the hall or a car slowing down outside. I didn't know if the scars would ever fade. But I knew this: Morgan hadn't won. Not yet. I had survived. And that was something Morgan couldn't take from me. The years have passed since Morgan disappeared from my life, but the memories remain, etched into my mind like a scar I can't remove. I've built a new life, a safer one, but I still find myself looking over my shoulder, checking my locks, and never fully trusting anyone. The trauma is a shadow that follows me, sometimes closer than I care to admit. I've learned the hard way that love can easily become a cage, and the person who promises you the world can turn out to be the one who holds the key to your prison. I've become more cautious in everything I do. My relationships, my friendships, even the simple act of opening my door. It's strange how something that once felt so pure and real, love, can become a weapon used against you. I don't trust easily anymore, and I don't think I ever will. But that's okay, because I know now that I don't need to trust anyone to be okay. I have learned to trust myself, my instincts, my judgment, my ability to recognize when something isn't right. It's a skill I wish I hadn't had to learn, but now I know the warning signs. I know the red flags. If you're reading this, I want you to know something. The fear you're feeling, the isolation you're enduring, that's not love. That's control. And it will never stop until you stop it. I was one of those people who believed in fixing things. I believed that love could conquer all. I thought if I just tried hard enough, if I was patient enough, everything would be okay. But I was wrong. The truth is, love doesn't have to hurt. It doesn't have to make you question your worth, your safety, or your sanity. If you ever feel trapped, if you feel like your life is slipping away into someone else's control, you need to get out. Don't wait for the violence to escalate. Don't wait for the threats to become real. Love isn't supposed to be a prison, and if it feels like one, you need to recognize that for what it is: toxicity, obsession, and a danger to your well-being. I look back now and I wish I had left sooner. I wish I had trusted my instincts from the very beginning, before Morgan's obsession took hold. But there's no going back. I can only move forward with the knowledge that I survived, that I'm still here. And I will never, ever allow anyone to have that kind of power over me again. Emily's new apartment creaked as she sat down on the edge of her bed, looking around the dimly lit room. It was supposed to be a fresh start, a new beginning away from the chaos of her past. But no matter how many boxes she unpacked or how many times she rearranged the furniture, there was an unsettling silence that haunted the air. She tried to brush it off, telling herself it was just the nerves from the move, but deep down, something didn't feel right. Her phone buzzed and she froze. A message from an unknown number. Her heart pounded in her chest. "I told you I'd always be with you." The words were so unmistakable, so familiar. They were from Victor. She stared at the message, her stomach dropping into her knees. It had been weeks since she broke up with him, but now it felt like he was still here, still watching. She had thought the nightmare was over. Emily stood up, pacing the room, trying to push the thought out of her mind. But she couldn't shake the feeling. The footsteps. The whispers. The way the shadows seemed to linger a little too long. Victor wasn't just stalking her anymore. He was here. And this time he wasn't human. Emily remembered the first time she met Victor. It was a warm summer night in Brooklyn, and the city lights shimmered against the backdrop of the skyline. She was at a rooftop party with friends, laughing and enjoying the cool breeze. That's when Victor approached her. Charming, confident, with a smile that seemed to light up the whole rooftop. He was easy to talk to, and before she knew it, they were sharing secrets and stories as if they had known each other for years. In the beginning, everything felt like a dream. Victor was everything she had ever wanted: attentive, romantic, and caring. He surprised her with flowers, took her on weekend trips to Central Park, and whispered sweet things in her ear under the stars. Every day was like a fairy tale. Emily thought she had finally found someone who truly cared for her. But things began to shift. It started small, little things that didn't feel right. Victor started showing up unexpectedly at her apartment, asking where she was when she wasn't around. He started calling her more often, sending texts at all hours of the night, and the romantic gestures began to feel less like affection and more like a demand. But it was when he started questioning her every move, where she went, who she was with, that Emily began to feel the first pangs of unease. "Why didn't you answer my call?" Victor's voice echoed in her mind, and she remembered the chilling way his eyes would darken when she didn't reply immediately. The once charming man was slowly becoming someone else, someone controlling. Emily didn't know how to escape this new side of him. As the days passed, Victor's obsession grew darker. Emily could feel it, like a shadow looming over her every move. It wasn't just the frequent texts or surprise visits anymore. He started showing up at her workplace, leaving gifts on her desk with little notes, "I miss you," or "Can't wait to see you tonight." At first, Emily tried to brush it off, telling herself it was just his way of being affectionate. But the unease in her chest only grew stronger. One day after work, Emily found a note taped to her apartment door. "You can't escape me, Emily. I'll be waiting for you." It was the first time she truly realized something was wrong. She had tried breaking up with him before, but Victor's grip on her life only tightened. The more she tried to pull away, the more he pushed to keep her close. The first physical altercation happened on a quiet evening. Emily was packing her things, preparing to leave for a friend's place, when Victor barged into her apartment uninvited. "You can't just leave me like this," he hissed, grabbing her wrist with an iron grip. "You're mine, Emily. I'll never let you go." His voice, once smooth and comforting, was now cold, filled with malice. The next moments felt like an eternity as he shoved her back into the apartment, slamming the door shut behind her. Emily tried to run, but he was too fast, too strong. When she finally broke free, she could still feel the burn of his touch on her wrist. Shaken, Emily thought she had finally gotten away from him. But as days passed, the strange occurrences started. Her apartment door would be unlocked when she was sure she'd locked it. Items on her desk were moved slightly, just enough to unsettle her. Then one night she heard faint whispers, familiar, like Victor was there. She would turn around, but no one was ever there. The fear took root in her soul, making it impossible to shake the feeling that Victor was always watching. Emily thought moving to a new apartment would offer her some peace, but the nightmare followed her like a shadow. She found a small, old building in Brooklyn Heights, hoping the historic charm would help her feel safe again. The apartment was quiet, tucked away from the hustle and bustle of the city, but there was a lingering, almost suffocating presence. At night, the wind would howl through the cracks in the walls, and the building creaked as if it had its own memories. One evening, after hearing another faint whisper in her ear, Emily checked her phone. A message appeared on the screen. "I'm closer than you think, Emily." Her stomach dropped as she stared at the words. She didn't need to look out the window to know he was there. The shadow looming outside her window confirmed it. Victor was watching her again. Panicking, she dialed the police, her hands shaking as she gave them her address. When they arrived, they searched the area, but there was no sign of him. Still, Emily couldn't shake the feeling of his presence. That night, as she walked through the empty Brooklyn Bridge Park, the air felt heavier than usual. She'd gone there to clear her head, but now, it felt like the perfect place for a confrontation. Suddenly, out of the darkness, Victor appeared. His face was pale, his eyes wild and full of fury. His form seemed almost ghostly, like he had crossed some line between the living and the dead. His breath was cold against her skin as he grabbed her arm. "You think you can escape me?" he sneered. "I will always find you, Emily." His grip was stronger than ever, ice-cold and unyielding. Fear surged through her as she fought him off, pushing him away with every ounce of strength she had. But Victor wasn't the man she once knew. His body felt wrong, like he wasn't quite human anymore. She managed to break free, but not without a deep scratch across her cheek, one that glowed faintly under the moonlight. The mark seemed to burn, and as she ran, she realized the terror was only beginning. Emily had had enough. After that night in Brooklyn Bridge Park, she knew she couldn't keep running. She filed for a restraining order against Victor, hoping the legal system could offer her some protection. But when she returned to her apartment, she knew something was wrong. The atmosphere was thick with an otherworldly presence. She felt the chill in the air before she saw the strange symbols etched into her walls, ones she didn't remember seeing before. Victor's influence had gone beyond stalking. It was clear now he wasn't just a person anymore. He had become something else, something that couldn't be stopped by a simple piece of paper or the law. Desperate, Emily turned to a paranormal expert, hoping for answers. The expert explained what she feared most. Victor's obsession had bridged the gap between the living and the dead. His spirit was clinging to her, feeding off her fear, trying to drag her into the afterlife with him. One night, as she lay in bed, she felt the familiar coldness settle over her. Victor's ghostly figure appeared in her room, his eyes vacant, his skin more corpse-like than ever. "You can't run from me," he whispered, his voice rasping like a dry wind. "You're mine, Emily. Forever." She felt the presence of his hands around her throat, but this time her body was numb. She couldn't move, couldn't scream. Panicked, Emily realized that she was losing control. This wasn't just about her safety anymore, it was about her soul. She had no choice but to leave New York, the city she once called home. She moved to a small town upstate, hoping the quiet would give her peace. But even there, the shadows of the places she visited, the feeling of his cold hands, haunted her every step. She knew she'd never be completely free. Victor's obsession had left its mark, on her body, on her mind, and in the depths of her heart. But Emily was stronger now. She had fought back, and although she'd left the city, she hadn't left the nightmare behind completely. She could only hope that someday, somehow, she'd find the strength to put it all behind her. Years passed since Emily had left New York, but the scars of her past still lingered. She had rebuilt her life in the small town, surrounded by peaceful hills and quiet streets. She had started to trust again, to find herself again. But every now and then, she would wake up in the middle of the night with a cold sweat on her brow, the faintest whisper of Victor's voice echoing in her mind. She could still feel the heavy, oppressive air of his obsession lingering in the corners of her thoughts. Looking back on everything, Emily understood now. Love, true love, was never meant to feel like a prison. She had let Victor's obsession control her for too long, and it had almost cost her everything. The bruises and scratches faded, but the psychological scars remained. The lesson was clear. Love should be freeing, not suffocating. She had learned to trust herself, to recognize the warning signs of toxic relationships before they could take hold. If you ever feel trapped, scared, or controlled, get out, Emily would say to anyone who listened, her voice firm with the wisdom she had gained through the nightmare. Trust your instincts. Love should never make you feel like a prisoner. Though Emily had found peace, she carried the weight of her experience with her. The shadows still crept at the edge of her consciousness, a reminder that some loves never die. They just change form, becoming something darker, something you can't outrun. And the next time someone whispered that they would never let her go, she would be ready to run, and never look back.